It's a little bit rough being the last speaker because so much of what I had noted to speak about has already been talked about. But I guess that's a good thing. For those who aren't aware, Coptic Solidarity works towards equal citizenship rights for the Copts of Egypt. And we're a nonprofit, an international nonprofit, and we have affiliated organizations in Canada as well as in France. Most of our work has focused on the US until we got our special consultative status with the UN at the end of 2002. And since that time, we've started expanding our work to the United Nations. So that's just a little kind of preface of how we've been working in the past 10 years. So I wanted to highlight a few of the things that we've worked on since our last conference. And I thought maybe the best way to do that would be to share two stories, except that other people have already shared both of these stories. The story of Patrick Zaki and how he was arrested for merely writing an article about what it's like to be a Copt. You all know his story. And then it took a presidential pardon for him to be released. And then Suat Thabit, who after being stripped naked, being humiliated, being forced to leave her village, everything that she went through, and then it took like 6 or 7 years, the slow wheels of justice, to get nothing. Unfortunately, despite Cece saying that she deserved justice, she didn't get anything. Maybe because she was less sympathetic case because she's an older woman and Patrick was a young student. Maybe because more politicians put pressure on with Patrick's case. We don't know. But I think what those two stories show is the extent of what it takes for a Coptic person to try to get equal citizenship, right? Anything that happens in Egypt, there's no way for people to get justice. And so when we look at, whether it's the church law and how many churches are being approved, but they don't report on how many churches are being closed and how many are burning because they're old and they can't be repaired. We look at just every aspect of life, the education system, and how students face discrimination just for being Coptic. Everything that we look at, we see that there is a different system for religious minorities, be they Baha'i, be they Jews. There's only about a handful left in the country, or be they Christian. And so I think that's really the heart of what we've been working on, is how to explain and how to help people understand that the Egyptian government narrative is not reality for Copts. And I think that's our biggest struggle, especially here in Congress. And also, I would note that this is the very first year of our conference that the State Department didn't send an ambassador or somebody from the Office of International Religious Freedom, which is very disappointing. But we did have great representation from the U.S. Commission, so that was good. So let me just go through a couple of other items that we've worked on. One is the indigenous aspect of Copts. And I was really grateful that we could have the discussion on identity, on preservation of culture and heritage, because a lot of people don't know that Copts are the indigenous people of Egypt. I was on a panel a few months ago with an elderly white man who was Mormon, who was not convinced at all that Copts were indigenous people, and that Assyrians also were not indigenous. Shocking, this is like a law professor, BYU. So there's a lot that we need to do to help tell the story of who Copts are, that they are the indigenous people, and one of the ways we do that is through attending the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Rights. Just being there, getting to meet with different country missions, expressing, what the situation is of Copts, and then also we published a report last year going through the history and explaining how the Copts are indigenous and what those extra protections that they should have in Egypt, like which protections would apply to them. So that's one of our long-term goals. We do a lot of partnering, and it's really excellent news about Patriarch Sacco that came out this week, that he's been reinstated. Coptic Solidarity actually led a joint effort, a letter that 86 individuals, parliamentarians, members of Congress signed, and that letter was requesting that he be reinstated. So we maybe played a small role in that, but one of the things that we do is not just work for COPS, but we also speak out consistently for religious minorities in the region. And then Coptic women and girls, and this is something that we've been able to partner with a lot with Jubilee Campaign. See Hulda here, who was on the first panel. We've been able to submit several joint written submissions to the UN, and there's different special rapporteurs, there's different mechanisms where you can submit. So we've done a number of those. Almost all have focused on the situation of Coptic women and girls disappearing in Egypt, being abducted, but essentially being trafficked. And a few of the other things that we did for women, we also hosted or co-hosted joint side events up at the UN, along with Jubilee Campaign, and twice in the last year. And one of the most important things that we did just earlier this week, as a follow-up to the Jihad of the Womb report, many of you are probably familiar with that. That is the go-to report that talks about what's happening to Coptic women and girls. It's the only report on that topic that's actually detailed in the last more than 10 years. Just this week, we published new cases, 20, that happened between January and May of this year. So that's very powerful information. And it's taken a long time to get the State Department and USERF to pay attention to those cases. And so those are some of the things that we do, is we continue to find the cases. You have to, validate them, make sure that they are true, and then publish and share and ask for action. And a few other items that we've worked on recently, I actually think it was Ambassador Sales who mentioned the attacks on villages. Maybe that was somebody else. Regarding, one was in Al-Fawakir village, where there was rumor of a church that was going to be built, and a mob gathered and kept cops in their homes while they started burning them down. That was over the rumor of a church being built. 2-3 days later, same thing happened with destruction, mob violence in another small town in Minya, and that was over an actual approval for an evangelical church to be built. So we did a joint letter as well for that, that we've sent to the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. So as you can see, we are working a lot of different angles, whether it's with the International Religious Freedom Roundtable here in DC, with different faith groups, different denominations, here in Congress, at the State Department, with the United Nations. We're basically doing everything that we can to create awareness, to advocate, and I would say, one of the things that you all can do, thank you for showing up today, that's huge, actually, but also, share the stories of what you've heard today, not just of COPS, but of what's happening to religious minorities like Yazidis and people in the region. So if you could share it on your social media, forward emails, all of those things, it really does make a difference. If you have any questions, I'll take those about our work, but I wanted to tell you briefly, tomorrow our program's gonna start at 9:30 at the Hilton in Springfield. If you're staying there, you have breakfast included in your reservation, and we need to be out of this room completely by 4, so we don't have a whole lot of time. They're actually using it for Congress. And we have Congressman French Hill to thank for getting us this room. So, yeah, big thanks. Any questions about Coptic Solidarity, our work this year? Anything else? You're an easy crowd. All right. Thank you for joining us.